Our top story tonight, the Trump administration today announced the reimposition of sanctions against Iran. Those began at midnight. The president following through on his promise to undo the Obama-era nuclear deal with Tehran. The first set of sanctions returning tonight target the Iranian automotive sector as well as gold and other metals. A second set of sanctions targeting oil and the Iranian central bank will be reimposed in November. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani responded, saying Iran couldn't hold talks with the United States while under those sanctions, but also acknowledging that they would be willing to talk if the Trump administration is sincere. Joining me now, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. Ambassador, good to have you with us.
Glad to be with you, Lou.
Ambassador, let's start with Iran. You have made it clear, the president has made it clear that this is going to be stern stuff, your policy toward against Iran. These first sanctions, however, are not as powerful, one could argue, as the second set, which would come with the November 4th. Your judgment.
Well, the purpose of the phased impact of the sanctions is to provide a fair wind-down period for companies that relied on the deal made in 2015. But I think the effect of the sanctions has already been felt in Iran. The currency, since the president announced our withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, the Iranian currency has decreased by nearly half. We have seen millions and millions of dollars in currency leaving Iran as the elites move their assets out of the country for fear of this. And we've seen a continuation of demonstrations and even riots in towns and cities across Iran as the economy has gone into a tailspin. So I think the effects are already being felt.
The president's tough policy on Iran, withdrawing from the deal, now these reinstitutions of sanctions. We get a report from Tehran. Rouhani saying that Iran is open to negotiations if the United States is sincere, referring to, I assume, the president talking about a comprehensive deal is still something that he would be interested in negotiating. Could you explain that for us?
Sure. Look, the president has said since really beginning in the 2016 campaign, he's open to negotiating with leaders like Rouhani, like with Kim Jong-un, to sit down with them. The Iranians have used negotiations in the past just to delay the effect of sanctions and pressure and to continue making progress on their nuclear weapons program. So if the Iranians really want to sit down and talk about not just the failed nuclear deal, but their ballistic missile program and their support for terrorism and their belligerent military activity in the region, we're prepared to do that. That's a suggestion that France's President Emmanuel Macron has made that we'd like to see the Iranians carry through on.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm trying to get a sense of what weight you give Rouhani's statement. It's obviously too early to call it a breakthrough. How would you characterize it?
Well, in the past, these kinds of statements have been propaganda. We'd like to see some real performance from Iran, but the president made it clear he'd be willing to speak as long as we cover all these issues, not just the failed nuclear deal.
And turning to China, the tariffs, there is obviously, this is starting to spiral upwards. It is still a minute fraction of the total trade relationship, which a lot of commentators forget when they start trying to explain why a market moves monolithically, at least in the minds of some. Your judgment about how far this is going to go and how far President Trump is prepared to go?
Well, I wouldn't underestimate how determined President Trump is. I think the ball's really in China's court. Look, for 20 years now, almost, as part of the World Trade Organization, they have pursued a mercantilist policy in what should be a free trade environment. And they've done worse than that. They've stolen American and European technology. They've engaged in forced technology transfers. They've been biased against foreign investors and traders in China. And for too many years, American administrations have let the Chinese get away with it. So I think the purpose of the president's tariffs is not just related to the trade deficit, but to force China to be held accountable for the violations of the agreements it's made and the commitments it's made about how to deal internationally.
And it's extraordinary, the years and years of what has been basically propaganda from so-called free traders about the fact that free trade does not have costs associated with with the U.S. economy. It's been deleterious. It has cut down economic growth. The president, in less than 2 years, has already broken through, it seems, to the public consciousness about what the reality is, that we have been on the losing end of a trade war that's been waged against this country at least since 2001 and China's admission to the World Trade Organization.
Right. And the president said in the context of the European Union, look, if you want to talk free trade, let's have no tariffs. Let's have no non-tariff barriers. Let's have no subsidies. If you really want to do it, to have a free trade zone like we have internally in the United States, we're prepared to take a look at that. But in the case of China in particular, I think even the Europeans agree they've taken advantage of a framework of free trade for their own policies, and they've succeeded.
And it is, as the president made that offer, you could almost hear the Chinese and the Europeans sucking wind through their teeth at the very prospect that suddenly they would have to go to free trade. Ambassador, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here.